In aviation's long history, one aircraft stands apart. In the once battle-scarred silent skies, one warplane earned its glory. In the fierce and deadly conflicts over Europe and the Pacific, a legend emerged. The legend of the transport F4U Corsair's beginning was anything but modest. Its predecessor, the Vought WWII, was the first plane to launch from the United States Navy's original aircraft carrier, the Langley, on October 17, 1922. The WWII had previously served with the Navy's first two fighter squadrons. In 1910, Chance Milton Bort began his journey with flying machines. Born on February 26, 1890, he trained as a mechanical engineer and upon completing his education set out to build an empire that would endure multiple relocations across the U.S. and shifts in management. Vaught's first planes were assembled in a third-floor room of an abandoned hosiery factory. Sections of the frame were lowered to the street through a window and reassembled there. This allowed engineers to test the engine by tethering the plane to a telephone pole. The aircraft, the WWII, was Vaught's seventh design, marked as Vought Experimental. A highly successful creation, it more than made up for Vaught's unconventional construction techniques. In February 1918, Army pilots tested the WWII, and their glowing reports led to its promotion as a fighter, quickly resulting in mass production orders. After World War I, WWII production continued, including the Navy's first orders for the aircraft. However, not all of Vaught's designs were successful. The all-metal V141 was a notable failure, with dangerously poor spin recovery despite extensive engineering efforts. A modified version with a stretched frame and redesigned tail renamed the V143 still failed to attract buyers. The immediate predecessor of the F4U was designed in 1936 by Vaught's chief engineer, with the final design completed and submitted in 1938. Out of 6 fighter submissions, this was the first to achieve success. Designated the V166 by the company, it entered testing as the XF4U. While modifications followed in subsequent years, the core appearance of the F4U remained largely unchanged. However, certain aspects of the original design fell short of expectations. The landing gear performed adequately under normal conditions, but during World War II, pilots often had to land in less than ideal situations. It quickly became evident that the Corsair's landing gear was too fragile for such abuse. Wheels frequently detached, and in some cases, the entire assembly broke off the fuselage. The Corsair's tendency to break under stress made the U.S. Navy uneasy, prompting several modifications to improve the landing gear's weight-bearing capacity and shock absorption. However, the demands of carrier-based operations during the war introduced a new challenge. Could the Corsair withstand the rigors of carrier takeoffs and landings? As a large and heavy aircraft, its landing gear remained vulnerable to the punishment it faced. Pilots, wary of missing the arresting hook, often slammed their planes down hard, placing additional strain on the assembly. The Navy conducted extensive tests to assess the design's safety, placing significant responsibility on the engineers. The shock of landing hard on a carrier deck had to be accounted for, as no one expected pilots to alter their techniques to accommodate inadequate landing gear. In most cases, test pilots landed the Corsair successfully, but occasionally failures of the landing gear made the U.S. Navy hesitant to risk pilots' safety until the issue was resolved. After further testing and modifications, the landing gear became less hazardous, but a new issue quickly emerged. The Corsair's extended nose significantly reduced the pilot's visibility. With its oversized engine and a cockpit positioned too far back, pilots struggled to judge their approach accurately. Carrier landings, which required precise positioning, became exceptionally dangerous and required immense skill due to the F4U's poor visibility. With no simple solution in sight, the U.S. Navy was at a loss. Eventually, the Corsair was leased to the British Navy, where it was promptly deployed on their carriers. British pilots flying the Corsair regularly from carriers developed innovative techniques to better judge their distance from the deck. Occasionally, landing gear issues persisted. Here, we see a pilot approach the carrier with only one wheel deployed, but the skill of the pilot in landing the aircraft is undeniable. Crashes were not uncommon, often caused by damage from enemy fire. In this instance, a damaged fighter loses control and crashes into the tower, vividly demonstrating the hazards pilots faced daily. Sometimes aircraft would fall just short of the carrier, though in most cases the pilots survived to fly again. One of the Corsair's most appealing features was its ability to fold its wings over the canopy, a design that significantly improved storage efficiency aboard carriers. The sight of the Corsair's wings unfolding before takeoff is nothing short of majestic. Despite its impressive performance, the F4U still posed significant visibility challenges during takeoff. However, its growing record of success was quickly solidifying its legendary status among naval aviators. Although the Navy was initially hesitant to adopt the Corsair for carrier operations, by early 1945, large numbers were operating from carriers in the Pacific, and the Corsair remained in service long after the more established F-6F Hellcat. Numerous versions of the Corsair were developed, starting with the prototype F4U-1, which saw action on Guadalcanal in February 1941, to the F4U-7, designed specifically for the French Navy, with an elevated pilot seat. Several variants were configured as night fighters, beginning with the F4U-2, which featured a radar pod mounted on the starboard wing. Additionally, some models were adapted for photo reconnaissance missions, such as the 1P, equipped with a K-21 camera housed in the rear fuselage. All variations of the Corsair shared one unmistakable feature: the distinctive gull wings. These wings allowed the necessary 90-degree angle with the fuselage, avoiding the need for a mid-wing design, like the Hellcat. The gull wings also served another crucial function. They provided enough ground clearance to accommodate the 13-foot propeller with the length of the landing gear. Among the many diverse and imaginative aircraft designs, the F4U Corsair stands out as one of the most visually striking. Its iconic shape is instantly recognizable, and the elegant wings, which earned it the nickname Bent-Wing Bird from its pilots, contributed to its charm. Other nicknames included Ensign Eliminator, Old Hose Nose, and the Hog, while the Japanese referred to it as Whistling Death. The power behind this fearsome moniker was a twin-row 18-cylinder air-cooled radial engine. With an initial bore of 5 3/4 inches and a stroke of 6 inches, the engine had a capacity of 2,804 cubic inches. By the war's end, Pratt & Whitney was producing engines at over 30 facilities in the United States, with 6 other companies manufacturing the engines under a nominal wartime license fee. Contemporary trends indicated that air-cooled engines were falling out of favor, while liquid-cooled engines preferred by Europeans were poised to dominate. However, for carrier operations, the radial engine offered significant advantages in weight, maintenance, and supply logistics, justifying its continued use. Despite wartime preferences, 2 of America's most successful fighters, both the first to surpass 400 miles per hour, utilized the outdated air-cooled engine. These aircraft were the P-47 Thunderbolt and the F4U Corsair. When Pratt & Whitney developed the Corsair's engine, they recognized that regardless of its power, its primary purpose was to drive a propeller. The Hamilton Standard Company was contacted to build the Corsair's propeller, employing cutting-edge technology for the time. The propellers were constructed around a cold, stretched steel hub with the skin welded on using silver. As with any engineering feat, The Corsair's engine and propeller were a product of expertise, innovation, and continuous testing, resulting in flawless craftsmanship that played a significant role in the aircraft's tremendous success. A thirsty Corsair consumes 234 gallons of fuel from the fuselage's first tank and another 300 gallons from the second tank in the wing. Its oil capacity is more modest, at just 23.5 gallons. Given the recent strides in scientific and technological advancements, it might seem that propeller-driven aircraft are outdated relics of a past era. Space stations are being built, and humanity's exploration of the furthest reaches of space has transitioned from science fiction to reality. Considering that, would the desire to fly a prop plane seem absurd? Certainly not. Imagine the joy of taking your Corsair out for a leisurely flight. The warmth of the summer sun, fields and prairies bathed in golden light, the vast, clear blue sky, with nothing to hear but the roar of the engine. Yet the skies weren't always so serene, and there were many other sounds besides the hum of a solitary engine. Not so long ago, the skies were filled with a different kind of noise: the explosions, gunfire, and the devastating toll of war. The Corsair played a crucial role in many of the battles during the Second World War. It performed exceptionally well in aerial combat, achieving a remarkable kill ratio of 11.3 to 1 by downing 2,140 enemy aircraft, while only losing 189 of its own. The ground crew was tasked with regularly inspecting and replacing the Corsair's weapons, a responsibility they took very seriously. This impressive array of destructive armament gave the enemy much to fear. The F4U was armed with powerful weaponry, including 8 5-inch rockets mounted under the wings or 2 1,000-pound bombs, along with 6 0.50-inch Browning M2 machine guns in the outer wings, each with 390 rounds per gun. From the F4U-1C onwards, 4 20mm cannons were mounted in the wings, further enhancing the Corsair's firepower. Loading the wing rockets was a straightforward task, but to avoid the risk of premature or failed rocket launches, careful installation was essential. During the war, this procedure was performed hundreds of times daily on countless Corsairs and other fighters. It's impossible to estimate the exact number of rounds fired by Corsairs throughout their combat history. The sheer power and effectiveness of the Corsair in attacking ground targets is evident in this footage recovered from the F4U's onboard camera. In the Pacific Islands, pilots dropped napalm bombs on enemy targets. These bombs didn't need to make direct contact. Their destructive power incinerated everything in the immediate vicinity. Locals, who were fortunate enough to survive the attacks, could do little to prevent the fires from spreading. The Corsair's performance was exceptional, with its established track record and twice the horsepower and destructive capability of Japan's primary fighter, the Zero, making it an invaluable asset to the Allies. With speeds reaching up to 462 miles per hour, the Corsair was nearly untouchable, leaving the enemy lucky to even get close. Measuring 41 feet across with a length of 33 feet, the Corsair stood 15 feet high on the runway and had a total wing area of 314 square feet. Its weight ranged from 9,167 pounds when empty to 16,160 pounds fully loaded. VMF 124, the first squadron on Guadalcanal, demonstrated the Corsair's effectiveness, downing 68 Japanese aircraft while losing 11 Corsairs and 3 pilots during their tour. The first F4U ace was Lieutenant Kenneth Walsh, who scored his 5th victory on May 13, 1943. Walsh would go on to claim 21 more combat victories. With production ramping up, Corsairs were being delivered in large numbers, and the Marines eagerly welcomed them. In the Pacific theater, the Corsair proved to be a dominant force. Throughout the challenging island-hopping campaign, the Corsairs provided the Marines with a significant edge over the best Japan could field. The pilots who flew these legendary aircraft, along with the maintenance and engineering crews who kept them in the sky, bore the hardships of war with remarkable composure. Cheerful faces hid the fear and dread that must have lingered beneath their calm exteriors. A simple game of cards or a laugh with colleagues could be abruptly interrupted by the call to action. These were essentially two types of scrambles. The first scramble, which was initiated when enemy aircraft were detected on a course toward the airfield, and the slow scramble, when Corsairs were dispatched to attack an enemy target. Here, the crew chief and pilot work in perfect coordination. While the pilots receive their briefings, the crew chief starts the engines to warm up the cylinder heads to the proper temperature. He then assists the pilot with his parachute before taxiing and takeoff. In places where a proper runway wasn't available, gridded metal sheets known as Marston mats were used. These mats could be quickly laid down on any bare ground or sand, and they were a common sight on the beaches of the Pacific Islands. Marston mats were also used in other locations, like China, India, Burma, and Italy. The Pacific beaches provided a stunning, if unusual, backdrop for this squadron of Corsairs. The pilots must have found the sun-drenched sand and crystal-clear waters appealing, even as they spent much of their time confined to the cockpit. But the war was far from a vacation, and while pilots may have enjoyed moments on the beach, a fierce battle was often happening not far away.
Navy planes dominated in the Pacific War. Fighters, the Grumman Cat series, the Wildcat, the Bearcat, the Tiger Cat, and the Hellcat. Hellcat pilots shot down over 5,000 Japanese airplanes in the Pacific. And the Helldiver that replaced the Dauntless. There were PBYs, and the Kingfisher spotter and rescue planes, and of course, the 400-mile-per-hour Corsair. The Corsair was one of the most successful fighter planes of World War II, and very effective later in the Korean War. Most of its fighting in World War II was in the Pacific theater against the Japanese. The Navy flew the Corsair from aircraft carriers, the Marines from island airfields. It was an air-to-air fighter, it was a ground attack aircraft, and escorted on bomber missions, protecting them from Japanese fighters. The Japanese called it whistling death because of a distinctive sound the Corsair made at high speeds.
It is newly painted in honor of U.S. Naval Aviator Charles Joseph Obie O'Brien. Growing up building models, hanging out the airport, and devouring aviation books and magazines, Obie took to the skies at 9 years of age in a Ford Trimotor in 1937. Flying was in his blood. In 1946, while Obie graduated from prep school, the Navy started a new program for potential pilots, known as the Naval Aviation College Program. Passing all the necessary exams, he was eligible to attend a college with a Naval ROTC program. He enrolled in Villanova College and was also sworn into the Navy on July 18, 1946, as a V5 apprentice seaman. After spending the required 2 years in college, Obie reported to Naval Air Station Pensacola, Florida, where he trained in the SNJ and Hellcat. He earned his gold wings in June of 1950. Upon graduation, he reported for duty with Jet Training Unit 1 at Whiting Field, where he logged time in the Lockheed TO-1, the Navy's designation for the F-80C Shooting Star. Completing his jet training, Obie was assigned to a Corsair unit. As he says, go figure. Obie has over 7,000 flight hours in 52 types of aircraft and 735 arrested landings on 20 different carriers. He also held the honor of being the only pilot in the world actively flying the Corsair, like he flew in combat until he retired in 2013 at the young age of 85.
359 was my airplane. It had my name on it, and I liked it. Of course, I flew it 3 times in combat. It's been well taken care of. It's had 6 or 7 owners in the last 60 years, and it's just like a brand new airplane. When I got in it, a lot of nostalgia. Some of the instruments I didn't recognize because when I flew it, it was pretty basic. But the airplane smelled just the same. I certainly appreciate the past owner and the present owners taking care of my airplane. Ever since I was a little toddler, about 5 years old, I was interested in airplanes. We were vacationing in Ocean City, New Jersey. Fortunately, there was an airport very close to us. And I would go down there on my bike and hang around and talk to the people. And I saw a sign that says there's going to be a tri-motor Ford airplane here next week. And you can get a ride on one. So I thought that was a good idea. And the price for me would be $2.50. $2.50. I was only 9 years old. This is 1937. $2.50. I was a paper boy, and I got a penny of paper, so that was 250 papers I had to deliver to get that ride. So I went down there, and I got onto the airplane. We had about a 15-minute ride, and I came back. I had not asked my parents whether it was okay or not because I figured that permission was to be very hard, impossible to get, and forgiveness might be a little bit easier. So I took my ride, and then when I came home, I told my mother what I had done, and she was very, very unhappy. And I told her how sorry I was, but I got a good ride. My father just kind of smiled. That was the last ride I had until I joined the Navy and started Navy flight training. But that cemented my desire to fly. There is no doubt that what I was going to do later in life. I graduated from high school in 1946. In 1946, everybody in the Navy was, all the pilots, everybody was getting out and going back to school. The Navy saw that there would be a valley of lack of pilots during those years, and so they started a one-year program, which would, if you could qualify, get yourself into an NROTC college, pass all the aviation, the physical and the mental, pass the interviews, they would let you enlist as an apprentice seaman, send you to school for 2 years. I went to Villanova, by the way, for 2 years, $50 a month in books and tuition. And then following that, you would go to Pensacola, be sworn in as a midshipman, and go through flight training. I went to Pensacola in 1948. Took basic flight training in the SNJ, qualified on the carrier in the SNJ, went down to Corpus Christi for advanced training, flew the Hellcat, the S6F, went through that training, qualified on the carrier in the S6F, and got my wings in June of 1950. In 1950, I was assigned to take jet training. The Navy had some F-80s, we called them TO-1s, single-seat jet. And it was only a month course, 25 hours, and I went through that and enjoyed flying a jet. It was a new experience for me after flying the SNJ and the S6. My first flight, I had never been in a tricycle landing gear. I had never been in any kind of a jet, even a commercial jet. And so it was quite a thrill to sit there, be able to see the runway clearly, and add the power and take off. It was quite a thrill. After completing the jet training, I went to talk to my detailer, and he said the Korean War had started, and they were starting a couple of squadrons down in Jacksonville, Florida. It was 4 Corsair squadrons, and they needed pilots. So guess where I was going? I was going to Jacksonville and fly Corsairs, which I had mixed feelings about. I would like to fly the Corsair, but I also would have liked to flown jets. But in the end, I think the best thing that ever happened to me really was to be assigned to Corsairs. I made 2 med cruises in the Corsair, flying the F4U5, the first cruise, the F4U4, the second cruise, and then we went to Korea flying the F4U4. The skipper called us into an all-pilots meeting and said, guess where we're going, guys? Because everybody really was anxious to do our share. The West Coast pilots were flying, and we were going into med. We thought maybe we should be doing our share of the fighting. So we left Mayport, Florida on the Lake Champlain, which is a Essex type carrier, straight deck, of course, and went through the Med, through the Suez, and into Korea. We flew a line period from the Lake Champlain and cross-decked over to the USS Boxer, and they sent a jet squadron over to the Lake Champlain. It had something to do with the fuel capacity of the ships. On my first launch, we briefed in the ready room for a strike on a bridge. The bomb load was going to be a 1,000-pound bomb and 250 bombs, and six loaded 50 caliber machine guns. We briefed very carefully the launch of four Corsairs. I was number 4. Went out to the airplane. At that time, I remember being a 25-year-old bachelor, hot to trot, ready to go out and break something. Really. So when I got in the airplane, you would taxi up to the deck launch officer. He would give you the wind-up signal after you gave him a thumbs up that your instruments were okay. You would add as much power as you could until you felt the tail just getting very light. When he gave you the signal to go, you would add full power, and that big 13-foot prop, a lot of torque, so you needed a lot of right rudder. And you went off the deck. The ship would be making some of its own wind, at least 32, maybe 35 knots. You were too heavy for the natural wind in the ships. They would download you a little bit, but that didn't happen very often. In any case, when you went off the end of the deck, you would settle just a little bit. You would get your wheels up as fast as you could, get a little bit of speed, raise those flaps gently, and turn off. The flight that we had was on a bridge in North Korea. And it was heavily dependent on both ends. I think there was also railroad tracks on it. we climbed up to 8,000 feet, saw the target, and we made individual runs. The leader went down, number 2, number 3, and number 4, which was me. By the time I got started in my run, there was pretty heavy anti-aircraft fire. And I thought, oh boy. And coming down, I could see these orange, they look like tennis balls coming up at me. And I thought, and I could hear them as they went by the airplane go, woof, woof. And then I thought to myself, I'm seeing only about a sixth of the ammunition being released. But anyway, we would drop our bombs at about 3,000, the big bomb about 3,000 feet, and then we made 2 more passes to get rid of the other 2 bombs. And with each pass, it seemed like those tennis balls, those red tennis balls, I call them, were getting closer and closer and more. In any case, when I got back to the ship, nobody was hit. It was a good flight, and we did significant damage to the bridge. We came back, came around, we all got aboard safely, and when I got out, then I got scared. I was not scared I was concerned, but I wasn't scared until I got back in the ready room and said, oh boy, that was hairy. We flew both, I think, of the 24 missions, I flew 11 close air supports missions. The rest were strikes. And when we couldn't do a strike, we would be set free to do what we called road recce. And anything in North Korea was moving, wheeled, we would shoot at.
Okay.
On one occasion, I got 2 boxcars, which was good.
Okay. Did you always fly number 4, or did you move up to an element lead?
No.
Flight lead?
I was mostly number 4. I was only an ensign.
And you were
And
one of the young guys in the
I was one of the young guys in the squadron. And we flew in sections, the leader and his wingman, and then the section leader, which was the last 2 airplanes. And that would be a more senior officer than an ensign or a JG. But that was my spot, which I liked. And I would try to, when we were making a run, I would kind of get off to the side a little bit or come in at a slightly different angle, because I knew that they had warsighted those first 3 airplanes, and I wanted to not be in the same flight path. The missions that I like more than the strikes were close air support. And the way that worked is after you would launch from the ship, they would shift you to a unit called Red Crown, which coordinated all the close air support missions. If somebody needed close air support, they would go to Red Crown, and then they would assign you a mission. I liked those missions because we could get down low. We knew that we were helping our troops. And that was very rewarding, and it was especially rewarding when you got a message from the ground that, attaboy. And that was really good. We were controlled a lot of the times by an Air Force Mosquito, SNJ, and he would mark a target for us, and he would tell us what the results of our mission were. And I enjoyed that because I felt I was really doing something to help people. And when I got an attaboy, that made me feel great. They would mark the target sometimes. Okay, I'm going to put out a red rocket. That's the target. Your target is so many feet from that. Okay, I see the red smoke, but then I look around and I see red smoke, red smoke, red smoke. Those rascals were listening to us, and it was clever. They had those things set. I guess they could do it by remote control, but it would, if you didn't know where the original smoke was, and you just came in, you wouldn't know what you were supposed to do. Yeah, I was flying missions, and when the war was over, instead of bombing, we would go out and fly our mission on the last day. Instead of going down, getting low and dropping the bomb, we did what I call dip bombing. You would fly along, drop the nose a little bit, drop your bombs, and get out of there. Nobody wanted to be the last one shot down.
That's
359 was my airplane. It had my name on it. And I liked it. Of course, I flew it down in Jacksonville, and I flew it 3 times in combat. It was a good airplane. I liked it very much. And on the way home from Korea, we came back through the Med, and the Navy told us to drop off 2 of our Corsairs in Port Leahy. I volunteered, since my airplane was going to be one of the put in the pool status. I volunteered to take it to Port Leahy, and I flew it over there, and with the other guy, and we parked the airplanes, and we were brought immediately back to the ship as soon as we transferred the airplanes. That was the last time I saw that airplane until a couple of years ago. I found that airplane was still flying, and it was in California. Okay, after we got back to Jacksonville with BF-44, we traded in our Corsairs for Banshees, the McDonnell twin-engine jet. So I finally got to jets, a little bit late, but I got to them. I flew them for the next 10 months when I got orders to Pensacola to be an instructor. I was an instructor in Pensacola flying the SNJ, and from there I went to photo reconnaissance school, and came back to Jacksonville in the Photo Crusader. The Photo Crusader was just like the fighter, except it didn't have any armament and didn't have any guns. It was unarmed. Every carrier had 3 of those Crusaders on it. We did the same thing that the satellites do now. I made 3 cruisers in the Crusader, and our squadron motto was alone, because we flew alone. We were unarmed, because we were unarmed, and we were unafraid. And I always figured 2 out of 3 is not too bad. After leaving the Crusaders, which was a fine airplane, it was the 2nd best airplane I've ever flown. The Corsair was the best, and the Crusader was 2nd best. I got orders to New York recruit aviation orientated officers. That would be the AOC, the crewmen, and the pilots. I did that for 15 months, went to the postgraduate school, finally got my degree, and then went to the USS Bonhomme Richard as the assistant air officer. The assistant air officer is the air officer in charge of all aircraft movements within about 3 miles of the ship and everything on the deck. Spent 15 months there, and then came back to Norfolk. And here I was assigned to a staff, Commander Fleet Air Norfolk, which had air stations and all the fleet airplanes aboard. I was operations officer there. And then I got orders to be 7th Fleet representative, 7th Fleet liaison in Saigon to everybody in Saigon. It was like the go-to guy for carrier questions. I spent 14 months there. I came back to Norfolk and finished out my tours as operations officer of Naval Air Station Norfolk. Meantime, I got attached. I found out there was a group in New York called the Sky Typers. They were flying SNJs, 5 SNJs, 10,000 feet, center one had a fly line abreast. The center one had a computer in it, which triggers smoke on all 5 airplanes, which led a dot matrix message across the sky. And that was a lot of fun. I flew with them for 24 years, 24 air show seasons. The fighter factory over in Suffolk had some nice airplanes, and they were going to build a museum is where we are. And they had the Corsair, they had a TBM, and they had a Sky Raider and a lot of other airplanes, the Mosquito. And so I wrote a very nice letter and told the Sky Typers I found a better deal, so I was going to fly with them. To get into flying the museum, I had plenty of flight time. I had a heavy time, and they were looking for a couple pilots, particularly SNJ pilot. So I started flying the fighter factory's SNJ, and then they got the Corsair. And since I had a lot of Corsair time, I got checked out in the Corsair. And since I was checked out in the Corsair, I thought maybe I should check out in their TBM. And when I checked out in the TBM, I thought maybe I ought to check out in the AD, and I did. I saw the other airplanes, and then they built the Military Aviation Museum here in Virginia Beach, and we moved from Suffolk, from the fighter factory, moved everything over here. The surprise that you had for me was that my Corsair 412 359 was flying in California, belonged to a gentleman out there. And my friend Steve contacted him, and he said, if he's qualified in the Corsair, he's more than welcome to come fly his old mount. And over the course of 2 years, there was delayed, and finally we set a date, and we went out to California, to Ramona, near San Diego, and I was fortunate enough to fly my old Corsair that I had left in Port Leote 59 years ago. The last time I saw the airplane in Port Leote, it had been well worn. It was tired. It had been at sea for 8 months, combat in three or 4 months, and it was needed a paint job. When I saw it in Ramona, they opened the hangar doors, and I saw a beautiful plane, just like it was off the line. It was shiny. It was painted up very nice. It had Jesse Brown's name on one side. He was shot down in Korea. And on the other side was Hudner's name. Tom Hudner was a pilot who landed next to Jesse Brown in an unsuccessful effort to save him. Hudner was later on presented with the Congressional Medal of Honor for that action. Unfortunately, Jesse Brown was not recovered. No, I thought about the people who had flown that airplane. In addition to myself, they were all retired or passed on, and all the fun we used to have in the squadron, and it just brought back memories of nice times and nice people, and times that I relish.
And I took a photo of you sitting in an easy chair with a bottle of cold water, and I remember the airplane was parked right in front of the hangar, and you were staring at it. It seemed like you were a million miles away.
I was a million miles and 60 years away. I got a call from you, Steve, about 2 months ago. maybe 3, and he mentioned to me that my airplane was no longer in California, but it was in Florida. And the owner, the new owner, wanted to paint it in its original colors from VF-44, and with my number 412 on it, and the squadron designations, the F on the tail, and the yellow wingtips and rudder, top rudder, and that's great. They're going to put your name on the airplane, and I was ecstatic. I understand that it was in the Bob Black Sheep series. It was in the Reno Air Races, and it's just like a brand new airplane. When I got in it, a lot of nostalgia. Some of the instruments I didn't recognize because when I flew it, it was pretty basic, but the airplane smelled just the same. I certainly appreciate the past owner and the present owners taking care of my airplane.
Aviation, the art of aeronautics, began with the dreamers, inventors, and daredevils who dared to defy gravity. The journey of aviation was nurtured by pioneers like the Wright brothers, whose first flight marked a historic milestone. The role of aircrafts in world wars was groundbreaking, dramatically changing warfare strategies. This initiated a technological evolution in aviation, transforming the simplistic wings of a biplane into the thunderous roar of jet engines. Let's journey through the ages of aviation. Behind every great aircraft, there were great minds. These visionaries, like Sir Frank Whittle, the innovator of the turbojet engine, redefined air travel. Then there's Skunkworks' Kelly Johnson, the genius behind the SR-71 Blackbird. His designs combined speed, stealth, and power, crafting machines that dominated the heavens. The contributions of these pioneers have left an indelible mark on the canvas of aviation, shaping the course of history and inspiring generations of engineers and aviators. Each epoch in aviation history gave birth to extraordinary aircrafts, each with their own unique features and roles. The Lockheed SR-71 Blackbird was a marvel of speed and stealth. The F-105 Thunderchief, a supersonic fighter bomber, was vital in the Vietnam War. The P-51 Mustang, a long-range fighter, was critical in World War II. The P-47 Thunderbolt, a heavyweight fighter, was used extensively in the same war. The A-10 Thunderbolt II, the Warthog, is a close air support icon. The Messerschmitt Me-262 marked a leap forward in aviation technology. Each of these game changers were instrumental in their eras, and their legacies still resonate today. Beyond the game changers, there are those that have transcended their practical roles to become icons. The Concorde was not just an aircraft, it was a supersonic symbol of luxury and speed. The B-52 Stratofortress, a strategic bomber, is an icon of power and resilience. These magnificent machines and others like them have become much more than just aircrafts. They are enduring icons that encapsulate the audacious spirit, the relentless innovation, and the boundless ambition that define the world of aviation. For more amazing aerial footage, and to join us in this incredible journey, check out the DroneScapes YouTube channel.
The only reason for an airplane to exist is to go fast. At the Great Air Meet in Rheims, Glenn Curtis set a world's record of just over 43 miles an hour, and the quest for speed was on. In 1913, Maurice Prévost was flying a streamlined Dépôt-Dessin monoplane at 126 miles an hour, and Europe claimed the lead in aviation speed. Immediately after World War I, quest for speed became a catalyst for the development of fighter planes. Countries which had not invested in new engines for their wartime fighters would, for reasons of national pride, invest in new engines to race them peacetime. Then, in America in the 1930s, the situation reversed itself. Civilian aircraft, like the Travel Air Mystery Ship and the GB, Waddell Williams racers, became even faster than military aircraft. The reason was simple. Same engines were available to both civil racers and military fighters. The fighters had to carry guns, bombs, oxygen, and radios, while the racers were built only for speed. The world's absolute speed record was passed from country to country. And as the racers became faster and more powerful, they also became more expensive. America's Howard Hughes could afford to build his own racer, and with it set a land-plane speed record. But the absolute speed record of 440 miles an hour was set by a Macchi MC-72 seaplane in 1934, financed by the Italian government. Then military aircraft came back into the lead as the Heinkel and Messerschmitt firms competed for the title. The Messerschmitt Bf-109R set a speed record of 469 miles an hour in 1939, a record that lasted for many years. When the jet aircraft came out, speed records rapidly accelerated, the British breaking 1,000 miles an hour in 1956 in a Fairey Delta II. Speeds continued to climb, finally reaching 2,193 miles an hour in 1976 by the Lockheed SR-71, alias Blackbird. While speed was the object, there were many other benefits in creating ever faster aircraft. Improvement in fuels, streamlining, lubricants, materials, and the list goes on. Speed produced not only prestige and pleasure, but also utility. The speed record setters ultimately paved the way for commercial transports, business jets, and private planes.